Success. Rather become a man of value.
So she said, absolutely, we talk to them tomorrow morning and ask them if they would like to submit an offer subject to inspection. Meet us here first.
What?
She said,
I'm going to a meeting, what?
they may make us an offer. And she sent me her credentialing and her license.
Okay, I'm going into a meeting, a Zoom meeting on a class, so I can't really.
When are tenants scheduled to leave?
Either late September or the beginning of October.
How do you manage that? Well, the first thing I think you need to understand is that these people.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Yeah, we have Rabbi Yellen. Yaakov Yellen is in my home, and Jerry is here.
Okay.
Jeffrey is here. We have the nice Valley contingent. Okay. I hope everyone had a wonderful Shavuos. Hope everyone voted today.
Yeah.
I don't think people understood that if he gets 51%, he's the mayor. There's no runoff in November.
Right.
Honey, there's a cord here, be careful.
If he gets 50, then they'll be on the ballot in November.
Yeah, because he's behind. He's not in favor. He was in the polls. He was 33 to 36, 36 for Bass, and 33 for him. That was the polls showed.
The
So
polls don't mean anything.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I didn't like the format of the ballot. Did you? I didn't like that format. I like the old-fashioned.
Oh yeah, my
format.
God! Oh, I guarantee you, a
It's
lot
crazy.
of people. You have to hit more. A lot of people are going to
Yeah.
vote for one name.
Yeah, I did crazy. I was crazy. That's crazy.
I think we're on 288.
No. 252.
I'm sorry. Correct.
252.
Correct. 250. Correct.
My favorite topic, Ernie.
The earliest time would be Alos. Is that there's no one that you certainly cannot do it before Alos. This was because Mishiyakir is a certain amount of time after Alos. So we brought a few shittas that said that if you have no choice, but you cannot do it before Alos. Okay. What's the latest time to recite Kriyat Shema? Of course, this is our Gabbai Reb Chaim's favorite topic. I say that because our Gabbai Reb Chaim Eisberg always announces, let's say we're in the middle of Sukkot Zimra, it's 9:18. They'll say, okay, you have 2 minutes because it's the latest time for Kriyat Shema. So the Mishnah Brachos Tesom and Beis, the Goimra Ara Netzacham. So this was the shita that you should finish saying Kriyat Shema with the nates. And again, it's really referring to the brachos of Kriyat Shema. The last one is Goel Yisrael, and you want to be Soimech Gila. So you start Shmon Esrei right with the nates. Rabbi Yeshua Omer Ad Shalosh Sho'os. You have 3 hours. Now, these hours are halachic hours, not 60-minute hours. let's say, March 21 and September 21, the vernal and the autumnal equinox is when 12-hour day and 12-hour night exactly equal. So it's that, only those days would a halachic shah be exactly the same as a shah's manios. But for example, December 21, when the night might be 14 hours and the day only 10 hours, so you have to divide 12 into 10, it might be an hour is a 50-minute hour. So when it says 3 shows, you'd have to go 50 minutes times 3, so 150 minutes after Shkia. After Nates. Let's say Nates is 6 in the morning, so it would be 150 minutes after that. That's when we say 3 shows, when the Gemara says that, it's referring to a halachic shah. And why 3 hours? The kings sleep until the 3rd hour of the day. And thus, it's considered still Zman Kima, when people arise. I mean, most people wake up a lot earlier than that. But kings, wake up later. So it's still considered Zman Kima, B'shach b'cha uvkumecha, right? Because we want to fulfill the biblical injunction.
So right now, let's assume today, okay? When would you think right now is when must you finish your Shema? By when?
So here, if
Let's talk time-wise now.
9:18, I would say.
so,
What, by 9:18?
so let's take a look.
After 9.
I'm looking at my right. I have a, what do you call it? The thing that I use. Here, money. Time view. So here it says latest time for Shema now is 9:16 a.m. Earliest time 4:42, which is let's see, because Alos is 4:10, so Mishiyakir is 4:42.
It's about an hour before sunrise.
And let's see, Nate's now is 5:41. So let's see, 6:41, 7:41, 8:40. Right. So the hour now is long. The halachic hour is longer than 60 minutes.
It's about 70 minutes.
Right. So that's why you from Nate's, which we said was 5:41 and 9:16. So it's about an hour and 10 minutes. So 3 times, you're talking about 3 hours and 20 minutes. That's how you calculate that. The Rambam rules that ideally one is supposed to recite Shema at sunrise. The Rambam appears to say, though, that one is not allowed to delay reciting Shema until after sunrise. Only if one has not yet recited it yet, b'di'evet, after the fact, when they recite it until the end of 3 halachic hours, in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yoshua. Says the Rambam in Hilchos Kriyas Shema. Ezo izmana b'yom. What is the time of Kriyas Shema on the day? Mitzvah sheyaskil likros kodem netzachama. The Rambam seems to be saying that the mitzvah mina muvcher, the best way to do the mitzvah, is to start before the nates and finish it with the nates. Then he goes, v'im icher, if he went later than he's supposed to. V'kara achar she'ol shemesh. He read Kriyas Shema after nates. Yotzei dechovoso b'di'evet. B'di'evet you're yotzei. And comes the Rambam, following the Gemara in Brachas. He says, for the person who was over and went beyond the time that he was supposed to, you have until the end of 3 hours. So the Shulchan Aruch agrees that the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yoshua. Rabbi Yoshua is the one who said it should be done before nates. As we saw above, the Shulchan Aruch also holds that one should recite it as soon as possible after sunrise, even for one not davening vasikin. Nevertheless, the Shulchan Aruch does not appear to agree with the Rambam that reciting Shema after sunrise is considered b'di'evet, meaning it's not mitzvah min hamuvcher lechatchila. Says the Shulchan Aruch Or Chaim Nun Ches, v'nimshach zmana, the time of saying Kriyas Shema is drawn ad sof gimel shos, until the end of 3 hours. Shehu revi hayom, 1/4 of the day. Based upon this, the common practice today is to schedule minyanim in such a way that Kriya Shema will be recited before the end of the third halachic hour of the day. In the next year, we will address the question of whether one may still recite Kriya Shema in the Birchas Kriya Shema if it's after 3 hours of the day. Let me just read footnote 15. It should be noted that some interpret the opinion of the Gra, which is brought by the Chafetz Chaim in the Bir Halacha, to be that smichas kulas l'tfila, juxtaposing the bracha of Gal Yisrael to Shemon Esrei, must also occur within the time of Zman Kriya Shema. According to this, one must also complete the Birkos Kriya Shema, example, the bracha of Gal Yisrael before Shemon Esrei, before the end of Zman Kriya Shema. Meaning, according to the Gra, you got to finish all of this right before Nates. That means you have to recite Kriya Shema and the Birchos Kriya Shema. It all should be finished with Nates. Now, page 254. Calculating the hours of the day, something we mentioned already, shows Zmaniyos, the Magen Avram and the Gra. We learned in the previous section that according to the halacha, one may recite Kriya Shema until the end of the third halachic hour, shows Zmaniyos. In general, Chazal's regulations regarding hours of the day, such as the latest time for reciting Kriya Shema, Shemona Esrei, and other time-specific halachos related to the daytime, are all calculated based on halachic hours and not standard 60-minute hours. Halachic hours are calculated by dividing the amount of each day's daylight hours into an equal 12 parts. Thus, on a day when the time from sunrise to sunset is 12 hours, like we said, March 21, September 21, each halachic hour is also 60 minutes. While if the time from sunrise to sunset is only 11 hours, then the show's manios equal 55 minutes. Using show's manios in halachic calculations of the hours of the day is the near unanimous approach of the Rishonim and Achronim, and is summarized by the Mishnah Berurah in the following source. Let's look at the footnote. A minute number of poskim disagree with these calculations, and instead calculate the halachic times using standard 60-minute hours. These include Rav Yaakov Emden in Mor Tzia and the Pnei Yoshua. In their opinion, one calculates these hours from chatzos at night. For example, if chatzos is at 12:45 a.m., then Sof Zman Kriya Shema is 9 full hours after that, at 9:45 a.m. That means it would take you 6 hours, so that brings you, let's say, to the morning, and then the other 3 hours brings you to 9:45. And Sof Zman Tefillah is 10 full hours afterwards, at 10:45. In their opinion, the fact that the Sof Zman Kriya Shema is based upon when kings awaken indicate that the time does not fluctuate, as the kings likely did not change their waking habits based upon the time of year and length of the day. So, just so we know that there are achronim that dispute. The Mishnah Berurah explains that the latest time for Kriya Shema is always at the end of 1/3 of the total amount of hours of daylight. And all of the halachic times of the day are calculated in similar fashion. Shlish Hayom, V'im Hayom Aruch Yudches shows let's say it was sunny for 18 hours, Havi Vav shows Salayom, Uchshayom Aruch Tes shows, Havi Gimel shows. The Oilam Mishayin shows Edelfi Inyan Hayom. We always look at the daylight hours. Ve'im Nikroim shows Manios. Shayom is Chalak Liyud Beis Chalokim. You take the number of daylight hours divided by 12. Now, the position of the Magen Avram. The opinion which adopts the longer view of the day. However, poskim disagree as to whether these halachic hours are calculated from alos to tzesa kochavim or from anetza chama to shkia. The opinion which adopts the longer view of the day, meaning from alos until tzeis, is famously associated with the Magen Avram. Although this position was also adopted by others, including the Trumas Hadeshen, who was a Rishon, hundreds of years earlier. In this view, the hours are calculated based upon daylight and not based on the sun per se. Thus, the day begins with first light at dawn and concludes with the disappearance of light at nightfall, yielding significantly longer hours than the second position. Right? Says the Magen Avram, Shalosh is nearly kulama maninin ma'alos hashachar. He says we start, that is our period of daylight that we're going to divide by 12, doesn't go from nates to shkia, but goes from alos to tseis, which adds a significant, almost 3 hours potentially, sometimes more. Nearly kulama maninin ma'alos hashachar. V'chein mashma b'gemor daf gimel amid aleph, b'tois v'stibra maschol, the position of the Gra. The other view is referred to as the position of the Gra, but is also adopted by others, including the Lavush, Rav Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the Balatanya, the Shulchan Aruch Harav, the Minchas Kohen, and the Aruch HaShulchan. So before we do this, I just want to read the footnote. Tosfos. What did the Magen Avram base it on the Tosfos? Tosfos there refers to the time of Alos HaShachar in the context of the earliest time for Kriyat Shema and the Gemara's discussion of the Mishmaros or watches. Because there were various Mishmarot in the base of Migdash, people, Yisraelim would stand watch along with the Kohanim, b'Mamadam, Leviim b'Duchanam, and we say Yisrael b'Mamadam. Those Mishmaros, there were certain times. This may indicate that Alos HaShachar plays a role in determining the times for Kriyat Shema. See, however, in the continuation of the Shir, that the latest time for Kriyat Shema may be unconnected in calculations from the earliest time, and may be based upon the third hour after sunrise, even if the earliest times are linked to Alos HaShachar. So again, back to the discussion of the Gra. According to this position, the hours are calculated based on sunlight, and therefore they are rendered from sunrise, nates, to sunset, shkia. The Gra proves that the calculation runs from sunrise to sunset based on the premise that the days very closely approach perfect standard 12-hour days during the months of Nisan and Tishrei, like we said. March 21, Nisan, September 21, Tishrei. And therefore, you have days where the shows manios and the calendric shows are exactly the same. This result is possible only when we measure from sunrise to sunset and not from dawn to nightfall. Says the Biur HaGra. The Biur HaGra is in the Shulchan Aruch itself. Aval hu tamur ma'od. He's commenting on the Magen Avram's position. Ushkok g'doyle hi ma'od. He says it's an error. The Hamrina beperek mi shahaya. The asar parsros umalos hashachar atzesa kachavim. There were 10. The time it takes to walk 10 parsos is alos hashachar till tzeis. V'im kain yud beis shows biyom beinoni l'didei me'alos hashachar atzesa kachavim. So would that be 12 hours on an average day from dawn until nightfall? That would not seem to be correct. The Gra explains, I'm reading the footnote 23, that the Magen Avram presumably derived his opinion from the Gemara Pesachim, as it refers to how far an average person can walk during the day, and includes the times from Alos HaShachar until sunrise, and from sunset until nightfall within the calculation of daytime. Let's continue to the next page. V'toz g'doylahu. It's a big mistake. Sheken kosvu kol hatochnim, all the astronomers write, shebet kufas Nisan, ud kufas Tishrei shehen yomim beinonim, in the spring and fall seasons, yud beishos b'nei tzachama adashkiyah.
Kufa again?
Season. Kufa is a season.
Season.
So the spring season, kufas Nisan is spring, kufas Tishrei is autumn. Shein yomim beinonim, yud beishos b'nei tzachama adashkiyah. They knew that it's a 12-hour day from sunrise until sunset. Umalos hashachar tzedek who tezvav shows. It's 15 hours. Like, remember we said it's a 3-hour difference. If you add, it's an hour and a half in the morning, an hour and a half in the evening, added to Shkia Nates. The Gam Ken Yadua, remember, the Gra lived in the year about 1800. So it's post-Copernicus, yeah, 1790, something like that. The Balatanya was about the same time. So it's certainly post-Copernican. It's post-Kepler. There's a lot of information. It's post-Newton. So there's a lot of real modern astronomical data that the Gra, we know the Gra studied things like that. There's a very good biography, a modern academic biography, he's a Yale professor. So it's somewhat controversial because it claimed that the Gra actually read Aristotle, that he was a great book collector, and he scoured Europe for all sorts of, all the Greek classics. So it was very controversial in the yeshiva world, but I don't have any doubt that it was probably correct, because the Gra, here, look in the Bir Gra here, how he's discussing, known astronomical things at that time.
He also lived very far north. So the difference when you get away.
Would have been even greater.
Yeah, would have been greater. So it was magnified for him. So you saw the difference when you're not in the equinox period.
Correct.
How much the
Rav Yaakov is commenting that the Gra lived in Vilna, which was very north, and therefore the times that were off the equinoxes would be even greater. The Gam Ken Yadua, Shayamim b'mosach chama shavin la'leilos b'mosach shamim. He said like this: the longest day of the year, June 21, equals the longest night of the year, December 21. That's exactly what the Gra is saying here. V'chein le'hefech, and the shortest day and the shortest night are exactly the same. Then it says v'chein b'kav ha'shaveh shekol yomim v'leilos shavos. At the equator, where the days and nights are equal, that is, only when calculated daytime is from sunrise to sunset, but if the day is calculated from dawn till nightfall, the day is much longer than the night. It's a kasha on the Magen Avraham. Aval malos hashachar tzedek v'am harbe yosra yom alala. V'od kama kushtios atzumos yesh v'nilesi lekosrom. He has many other strong kashas. He's tired of writing. He's already mentioned a whole bunch of them. He doesn't need to write more, says the Gra. He says, "Iker kedivrei ha'oimrim sha'cheshbon u'me'anetzach chama shkias ha'chama ve'en lo azuz mimena." The Gra says, take it as a given that we measure from nates until shkia. V'gam ha'cheshbon shel shos monios b'chol makom eino minetzach chama shkias ha'chama. When you divide that period of time by 12, it's the period between nates and shkia. Ve'nikron shows, and that's the halachic shows. Ki shosh shonu vadai shir al yom beinoni. They calculate on an average day. Shem nikrom shows chav daled liyom. They knew that there were 24 hours to the day. Ukvar marti sheyud be shows b'yom beinoni u'minetz hachama shkias hachama. The 12 hours would be like on March 21 and September 21. Vav gabi kriya shma kenu udelo kemogen avram reish simen nun cheser shekasav nearly the hachal kolame. He says it's not like what the Magen Avraham says. Very unusual to come so strongly against the Magen Avraham. The Magen Avraham usually we follow unquestionably, but here the Gra comes down very strongly. Remember we said that you could b'shas atchak begin reciting it from alos. Really, the ikra din you want to do it mishiyakir. But if somebody couldn't do it, we said the final last stop would be alos. That doesn't make any difference in doing this calculation. Don't think because the time to start reading it is alos that you have to include alos in this calculation. No. Anytime we need halachos zmaniyos like by Shmon Esrei, even if something zman is still tzeis, because makom hacheshbon shel hashos ad shkias hachama, kemo plaga mincha v'chayotze. the calculations that we're going to do later on in the day by Mincha and Ma'ariv, etc., it'll all be based on the same shows manios. According to the Gra, the days and nights are balanced during the seasons of Nisan and Tishrei, not only according to astronomy, but according to halacha. Chazal generally refer to 12 hours, units of time, in the day, and 12 hours at night, which total 24 hours. Thus, each of these 24 units should be 60 minutes in length during the baseline months of Nisan and Tishrei, and they grow longer and shorter during other times of the year. But if the calculation of hours was determined based upon dawn and nightfall, as the Mogen Avram says, Chazal would have given the day more hours than the night, even during Nisan and Tishrei, since the day includes more time than the night, because you're going from Alos until Seis. Thus, the fact that both day and night are assumed to have 12 hours indicates that the determining times are sunrise and sunset. One of the questions that may be asked against the Gra, the Lafush, is raised by the Gra himself in the quote above. Why are the hours calculated from the vantage point of sunrise when halacha acknowledges dawn, which is Alos, as the legitimate beginning time for the performance of daytime mitzvahs, discussed previously? We had in our other shiurim about tzitzis and tefillin and some of the other dinim we learned that also it's mishiyakir, but worse comes to worse, Alos is the sort of, you can't do anything before Alos, but you could, in some cases, you could do it by Alos. So then why isn't Alos calculated in this calculation, since you could perform some of these daytime mitzvahs by Alos? The simple answer is that the number of hours in calculations of the day and night derive from the terms dictated by the traditional divisions of time. When Chazal determined the times of the day, they made use of accepted terms and norms in their time, which were based on sunrise and sunset. Even though from the perspective of halacha, a mitzvah may be fulfilled beginning at a time before the time of the conventional reckoning of hours.
See, I understand, it's a lot of, there's big problems, all these things with timing and scheduling and so on. Why not just say, okay, we know when 12 o'clock is, noon is, right? We know when noon is. In midday and mid-morning is 9 o'clock. So that's it, that's what you say. You have to do it before mid-morning, before the 9 o'clock, and that's it.
Jerry, the
Why
problem,
go through all this?
because Jerry, the problem with that is not every day starts at 6 a.m. According to you, a 6-hour.
Ernie, we didn't get the question. You want to repeat the question that we asked?
Jerry Einhorn asked, why didn't they just fix it at noontime and 6 a.m. and noontime? So I explained that halacha bases the beginning of the day based on an astronomical feature such as sunrise. So sunrise isn't 6 a.m. every day. Sometimes it's 5:30 a.m., sometimes it's 5:45. So that's the start of the day. And then you heard the Gemara said 3 hours after the start of the day. So you have to calculate what is the day. So it extends from 5:45 a.m. to, let's say, 7 p.m. when Shkia is. So that's 14 hours. You got to divide that by 12. So the halachic hour is really an hour and 10 minutes. And then 3 hours of the day is 3 times an hour and 10 minutes. That's how you get these funny times that it's constantly moving and adjusting as the day gets longer, right? So you add more halachic as the day gets shorter. So that's why we're in constant shift. It is more complicated because the Chazal based their mitzvahs on not a time. What you asked is, that's if we just have basic time, 6 a.m., noon, 6 p.m., midnight. But that's not how the mitzvahs were established. It's established based on Shkia, Alos, even more complicated, Mishiyakir, when you first can recognize a friend, Daled Amos, which is a period of time after Alos. So we can't use your recommendation. It would make it simpler. What did the Chazon Ish say?
Ernie,
Yes.
it's a place that, if you lived on the equator, basically, directly on the equator, you would have those 12-hour. I think you would have those 12-hour days.
Absolutely. So there you'd have the halachic zman and the calendric zman always the same.
Same. That's the only place that you would have it, and that would be for the total year.
Yeah. Yaakov says Singapore.
It doesn't vary more than like 20 minutes from summer to winter.
Is it close to the equator?
It's very close to the equator. And
It's on the equator, I think.
times, and it's
Close.
very, very close. Also, Colombia, many Jews come from Colombia by convention. They start davening, they start Shabbos, every Shabbos at 6:13, because it's never earlier than 6:13, it's a few minutes later.
That you have the same.
Yaakov said that Colombia is near the equator and they start Shabbos 6:13 because it's never later than that.
And you have the same
Never
thing.
earlier than
Few
that.
minutes later.
You have the same thing in Kenya. Kenya is also on the equator.
So same kind of thing where they start Shabbos at a fixed time. Okay. Says the Chazon Ish, Ein shum tam sheyachshavus hashos me'alos hashachar. We should never calculate the time that the day starts from alos. Bishvil shezman kriyas shema maskil malos. Because of the reason that maybe you'll say kriyas shema's trigger is alos. Because kivin shakavanolo dias sofazman. We're trying to calculate now when is the latest time to say Shema. The Sofas Manu Lo'ilam Achra Netzachama, it's always going to be after Nades. The Tachlis Ha'i Ro L'Rabim. Noichel Hagidis Hashach Roina Lefi Shosai Yomi Yois Achra Netzachama. We want to make sure that the public knows that it's related to the hours as it relates to sunrise. Similar to, I think, an answer to Jerry's question. In other words, according to Chazon Ish, since the end of the time for Kriyas Shema is considerably later than sunrise, it's not halachically impacted by alos, which is the beginning time for Kriyas Shema. Therefore, there's no need to consider the time of dawn when calculating the concluding time for reciting Kriyas Shema, but merely the time according to the standard calculation beginning from sunrise, Shkia, Nate, sorry. Chazal recorded the latest time for reciting Kriyas Shema in the Mishnah according to the standard time terminology in their era, which was oriented around sunrise. Now, what did the contemporary authorities, how did they weigh in on these things? Modern poskim are divided concerning which opinion to accept on the issue of calculating shows zmanis. Rav Moshe Feinstein rules in accordance with the approach of the Gra, and understands that this is also the view of the Mishnah Berurah. And this is the accepted approach in many Ashkenazi communities in the Golah and some in Eretz Yisrael as well. Says the Igros Moshe, Bidvar Zman Kriyas Shema b'Shachris, Hinei Minag Rov Makomos, Shemdino Seinu, most of the places in the United States, Russia Velita, maybe he wrote this may have been in early, most of them in Russia and Lithuania, V'chein Minag HaYeshivos, and the yeshivas in those areas, Haya ad sholosh shos minetzachama keshitas agra the Rav Shneur Zalman Miliadi, the Balatanya, that they calculated from the nates until Shkia. V'cheinu ha'ikar ledina b'chol anyadim. V'rak yechidim hayu machmirin la'atzman ad gimel shos malos hashachar. There were yechidim who were machmir that counted 3 hours from malos, which would obviously make it much earlier. Uveluach yesh ligvoa ke'etzem adin. When you publicize the luach, you should publicize it based on the ikar adin. Umincha lispalel achar shkia. You should not have a mincha after shkia. Rak b'shas atchak yicholin lismoch ala makilin. In an emergency, you can be soymich on the makilin, where you can say mincha even after shkia. We're going to deal with this all in great detail, I believe, in volume 11. V'chein yira yedidi b'chol ha'makamos b'Mishnah Berurah. He must be responding to a questioner who he referred to as his yedidi. B'chol ha'makamos Mishnah Berurah shadaitu noter k'agra. He points out that the Mishnah Berurah also had the same opinion, like the Gra. Varbe Rishonim Sovrim Kain, and the Rishonim hold that way as well. Lachain any rotzali kanis pilpula be'inyans. He doesn't want to go into great pilpul. Kima nachnu lachriya benorim don. Who am I to adjudicate between these great poskim? Aval Gra, hu basra, he is a later posik. V'iskim olav kol ha'olam. No, the whole world is maskim to the Gra. Shugadol Tuva, Veroy Lachria. He can be Machria on this. Vimken Halacha Kebasra, Ubeprat, Shagam, Hagon, Rosh Shlomo Zalman Milyadi Soiver Kane. So here's Rav Moshe, that he's like the Mishnah Berurah and the Gra. Despite the decisive and unequivocal ruling of the Rav Moshe, others, include Rav Mordechai Eliyahu, favored the position of the Magen Avraham. Rav Eliyahu writes that this is indeed the prevalent custom in Yerushalayim. Chishuv hashos hazmanios, hu achos mishos hayom chelkei 12 shos hayom, k'shebechashiv hayom me'amad hashachatz kachavim. He says you calculate the hours from alos to tzeis, divide them by 12. V'tzeis hakachavim hu ke 13 dakos achrei hashkia. He says it's 30 minutes after Shkia. V'yeshamim shu ke 20 dakos achrei hashkia. Some say it's 20 minutes after Shkia. V'yesh mish b'chashav zayom me'anetzach hamad hashkia, which is the Gra. Ach asfar rishona ikar, l'cheinu minig Yerushalayim. Many poskim have adopted the third middle position, according to which one should be stringent, in accordance with the Magen Avraham, regarding requirements from the Torah, like Kriyat Shema, and regarding rabbinic requirements like the blessings of Kriyat Shema and the Amidah. It is accepted to follow the more lenient view of the Gra. That means they would follow the Magen Avraham when it comes to Kriyat Shema itself, but the Birchos Kriyat Shema and Shmona Esrei, which according to most opinions are rabbinic only, then you can follow the opinion of the Gra. And the Piskei Teshuvos brings this approach. Hamekubal b'tfutzot Yisrael likvoa ki haMagen Avraham umidin sveika deraisa l'chumra. And if you're dealing with a deraisa dika mitzvah like Kriyat Shema, you should go l'chumra. And le'inyan shosat chak. But for example, when it's an emergency, v'chein le'inyan sof zman brachas Kriyat Shema tefillah shtimid rabbanon, revach haminik lakel kashit sagra v'aravu di'imei, and Shlomo Shneur Zalman Milyadi and the Gra, and you could be lenient like that. And a similar position is adopted by the Yalkut Yosef, the son of Rav Ovadia. L'chatchila yesh lachmer l'gabi sof zman Kriyat Shema l'chshov mishas olos hashachar. L'chatchila, he says you should be machmir and count from alos. V'amod hashachar ushivu v'shnayim dakos kodem zrichas Hashemes. He gives you that the measurement of alos is 72 minutes prior to nates. Ulian birchas Kriyat Shema shemid rabbanon yesh l'chashev dalad hashos shu sof zman birchas Kriyat Shema mazricha. You can do 4 hours after nates. We call makom shasat tzorech yesh lahakel l'chashev es hashos mishas azricha gam le'inyan sof zman Kriyat Shema. That means when necessary, you can be lenient and you can calculate from nates, which again extends it longer. L'chein tamid chacham atar b'limudo av l'shas haktana shel halayla. Let's say tamid chacham is up all night. Rishai la'achar l'tefillah shachar v'likra Kriyat Shema l'fi zman hagra. He can use the Gra's calculation because it'll give him more time. Sheyesh l'tzarif kan tzvar sa'omrim shezman Kriyat Shema me'aTorah ugam la'achar shalosh shoyos. Because this is going, the opinion, not that you have 4 hours, but only 3 hours for Kriyat Shema. A lot of the minyanim that on Shabbos and Yontif, they start at 9 o'clock, so later. And many of them hit 3 hours after alos very early. You shouldn't protest. At least the Tzibur should say Kriyat Shema after 3 hours when using the calculation of the Gra. And I believe that's when Chaim gives us the message that Sof Zman Kriyat Shema, we're using the standard Gra calculation from nates until Shkia. According to Yalkut Yosef,
When he makes the announcement, 9:15 The last conversation.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's 3 hours after.
Then
That's
you
3 hours.
just stop what you're doing wherever you're at.
Yes.
to zero and go to.
Yes,
this one
we
and-
learned that last
and
week,
you're
remember?
right.
We said you stop what you're doing and you say Shema, and you say Baruch Shem
And then
Kavod,
go back.
and then go back, and then you'll say the Birchos M'Rabanan. Yeah, we had that last time. According to Yalkut Yosef, the Chatchila, one should recite Kriyat Shema before the latest time, according to Mogen Avram. But it's permitted to rely on the opinion of the Gra when necessary. Okay. May one recite Kriyat Shema before davening? There's an additional issue that must be taken into consideration concerning reciting Kriyat Shema before the end of this month. Must one recite the entire order of Kriyat Shema before the end of the third hour? Or may one satisfy the time requirement by reciting the Shema informally without the brachos prior to the Zman, and then recite the full formal order of Kriyat Shema and its blessings in the order of Tefillah after the time has passed? I think that's what Jerry was basically asking. This question is subject to machlokas between the Ramah and the Gra. According to the Ramah, one may fulfill the obligation for Shema at the beginning of Tefillah when reciting the verse of Shema after the Birchas HaShachar, right in Korbanos. There is a section in the Siddur following Birchas HaShachar, but before Korbanos, L'olam Yehei Yodam, right, that concludes with the recitation of the first pasuk of Shema. The Ramah rules that one may fulfill the obligation of reciting Shema at the proper time if one recites Shema and Baruch Shem at that time. Tov lomar b'shachris achar Shema Yisrael Baruch Shem kvar malchus olam moed ki lefamim shoyim im Kriyat Shema likrois shelo bizman v'yotze b'zeh. Because sometimes by the time you get to Kriyat Shema with the brachos, it's after Zman Kriyat Shema, says the Ramah. So better say Shema and Baruch Shem in the morning, when you get to that point right after brachos. The Ramah holds. Now, do you remember last week we said that if you know you're going to get to Kriyat Shema with the brachos in time, when you say that Shema, you should say it like learning Torah. You should not have in mind to be Yotze, because it's better to have the mitzvah, the L'chatchila of Kriyat Shema with the Rabbanon. So if the Ramah is only talking about if you know you're not going to get there in time, like Shabbos where Pesukah Zimmer is long and it started late anyways. So that's what he's talking about. Ramah holds that one should always recite the Pesukim of Shema and Baruch Shem at the beginning of davening, due to the concern that one may occasionally recite the full Shema after the proper time has passed. Therefore, b'di'eved, one has fulfilled the obligation if he has recited Shema and Baruch Shem at this point. The Mishnah Berurah adds that ideally, if the Sov Zman Kriyat Shema, latest time for reciting Shema, is not about to pass, one should not have in mind to fulfill the mitzvah here, but rather in the proper location. So we're repeating what we said last week or 2 weeks ago. But if a person is concerned that the congregation will not recite Shema in time, then he may have in mind to recite at the beginning of davening. Ideally, he should recite all three sections. He should say V'ahavta, Vayam Shamoa, and Vayomer.
That's what we should be doing on Shabbos morning.
If you're not going to hit the time,
For sure we're not gonna get
okay,
time.
and a chanami.
That's what
that's-
we do at Cherry Side.
You say all three.
All three, and the congregation does too, at Birchas HaShachar.
That's the mission. Is that since the new Rabbi Rosenberg, or maybe even Rabbi Sugarman was doing that?
I don't know, 10 years.
Yeah.
more than 10
No,
years.
because he's the yeshiva shaman from there, Israel. So uvamakom sheyirish atzibur yarvu zman kriyat shema. If in a time where you're going to be afraid that the tzibur is going to miss kriyat shema, yichavein lotzeis b'zeh mitzvah saseh de kriyat shema. You should have in mind at that time, I'm now going to be yotze the mitzvah saseh of kriyat shema. The mitzvah deraisa kaimelon b'simin samech siv gimel. The mitzvah tzrichas kavana. Remember, we learned that you have to have special kavana of being yotze the mitzvah. V'yeshomim sheyikra kol haparsha rishona. Some say should read v'hafta. V'yotze tov shazikra kol hashloisha parshos. Says the Mishnah Berurah. Kimosha kosav apri chodosh. K'dei laskir tzis mitzrayim b'zman kriyat shema. U'v'chai adam b'chlal chet din zayin Hiskim la Pri Chodesh. So of course, Chai Adam was an important achron, and the Pri Chodesh as well. According to the Pri Chodesh, the obligation was the first paragraph Deraisa, and the third paragraph should be recited together, so the mitzvah of commemorating the exodus is performed together with the Shema. So that's the sheet of the Pri Chodesh there. Okay. The Gra, on the other hand, is quoted in the Bir Halacha as holding that one shall fulfill the mitzvah of Kriyat Shema only when reciting it as part of the Birchos Kriyat Shema, and not at the beginning of Tefillah. It's also brought in the Maaseh Harav, which is a sefer of the Gra's practices, various minhagim of the Gra. So there are a number of sources. Well, where do you see? So the Bir Gra is the main source where we find halachas by the Gra, which is his commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. Kilafamim, this is being quoted by the Chafetz Chaim in the Bir Halacha. In the Mishnah Berurah, when the Chafetz Chaim is going deeper into the halacha, so he's now bringing in the Bir Halacha, I am the Bir Gra, Shekosav, who wrote, quote, this is the Gra now, V'li nireh she'ein nachon b'zeh lotzeis below brachos. He doesn't like this idea of when you're in korbanos there, just all of a sudden, pink, parachute in and say Kriyat Shema without brachos. And also, Gam lo yismach gulot tefillah. There's no smichas gulot tefillah there. Now the Mishnah Berurah says, V'hu sover b'zeh, kishitas hara'ah, like a rishon, the ra'ah, shehuva b'beis Yosef, that was brought by the Beis Yosef. Remember, Rav Yosef Karo's commentary on the Tur. You're talking about 500 years before. The Tfei Adif L'Tzibur L'Meima Birchas Kriyat Shema D'Oraisa Ayin Sham. It's from the Beis Yosef that it's more preferable to recite the Birchos Kriyat Shema with the Torah mitzvah of Kriyat Shema, and don't do it in the beginning of davening. So it seems to mean that so far, what we're seeing is a machlokas between the Mishnah Berurah and the Bir Halacha brings the Gra. So we are noyeg pretty much like the Mishnah Berurah. He's just bringing an opinion like the Gra that it's not so simple, that he didn't hold like that. I just want to read the footnote. This seems to mean that the requirement of Smicha Gula Tefillah, which is juxtaposing Gal Yisrael to the beginning of Shemona Esrei, is also related to having fulfilled the Torah mitzvah of Kriyat Shema together with it. The Gra is sort of combining all of this. The Bir Halacha, in the continuation of the passage, considers the question of whether the Gra takes the position only when the minyan will recite Kriyat Shema in the proper location and time, or even when the minyan will not recite Kriyat Shema in the proper location and time. If the latter interpretation of the Gra is correct, then the Gra would be saying that it is preferable for one to daven alone rather than in a minyan if Kriyat Shema will not be cited in the proper time during the Birchos Kriyat Shema. According to this opinion of the Gra, if you know you're going to get to shul and they're not going to be there by, let's say, 9:15, they're going to be in Korbanos, you should daven at home rather than a minyan. That's the sheet of the Gra. Let's apply some of these ideas. Now, there are those people who follow the Gra on certain things. So if you follow the Gra on all things, maybe you'll follow this. But in general, most of us are not following Shitas HaGra and all the various mitzvahs that we have. Let's apply some of these ideas to the following case in the winter time, when one must be more careful about reciting Kriyat Shema in time, as the times are usually a bit earlier than in the summer. Think about it. If during the winter it's only 10 hours of daylight, then your 3 hours are going to be much shorter than when you're in the summer, when your hours are an hour and 10 minutes or an hour and 15 minutes.
Yeah, and the reason it's not that late is because of daylight savings. If you didn't have daylight savings, it would be an hour late.
Right, an hour later. Yeah, so Yaakov is pointing out that daylight savings is saving us. Otherwise, it'd be more problematic. The following table from Maizmanim offers the latest times for Kriyat Shema according to the Mogen Avram and the Gra in Jerusalem and London. So you can see latest Shema Mogen Avram using 72 minutes or 16.1 degrees. Because remember, according to Mogen Avram, you start from Alos, would be 8:10. But latest Shema for the Gra is 8:48. So it's a very significant difference. And in London, it was 8:44 versus 9:37. Wow. Okay. Because of, like Yaakov was pointing out before, that the more north you are, the more variance you're going to have as well. Accordingly, one in Jerusalem who wishes to recite Kriya Shema on the proper location would need to begin Shachris early enough to complete Shema before 8:10. That's according to Mogen Avram, or 8:48 according to the Gra. On Shabbat, this may mean that Shachris has to begin relatively early. On the other hand, one who wishes to recite Kriya Shema before Tefillah, in accordance with the leniency of the Ramah mentioned above, may begin Shachris somewhat later and simply recite Shema before those times, and then you're going to take care of it. One in London who wishes to recite Kriya Shema within davening would need to begin Shachris early enough to complete Shema before 8:44 or 9:37. This would mean that on Shabbat, Shachris can still begin around 9 a.m. if one follows the time of the Gra. If one recites Kriya Shema before Tefillah, according to the Ramah, there's much more time according to all opinions. On this date, the final time for Kriya Shema in New York is about 9:15 a.m., according to the Gra. Thus, one who wishes to recite Shema as part of the Tefillah on time must begin Shachris on Shabbos around approximately 8:30 a.m. I know that was the reason that Young Israel of Hancock Park moved their Shachris to 8:30. Now they've since moved it back with the new rabbi, but for years it was 8:30. Not when Walter and I davened, it was still 9 o'clock. But after we left that shul, they moved it to 8:30 because they wanted to make sure that they would hit Kriya Shema at the right time. What time is Shachris in the valley?
And they moved it to 8:45. No, they moved to 8:30.
Or maybe they moved it to 8:45. Maybe they moved to 8:45.
In the valley, it's 9. That's why, again, we do the
three
practice of Kriya Shema and Yichus HaShachar. You never make.
Chaim would like to do the same by us.
Let's see about women and Kriya Shema. Susie, women. Is the rule that Kriya Shema must be recited by the end of the third halachic hour relevant to women? As we know from previous shiurim, women are officially exempt from the daily obligation of reciting Kriya Shema. For this reason, Rav Yitzchak Fuchs writes in Halichos Bas Yisrael, based upon the Eshel Avram, who's a commentary on the Orach Chaim, that even women who do recite Kriya Shema in order to accept upon themselves Ol Malchus Shamayim need not recite it by the end of the third hour like men. There is no time frame. They can recite it even later. Ein choiv al akbonos v'noshim lahakpid al Kriya Shema bizman adavka. V'hezber adin, what's the reason for that? They're not really in the mitzvah. El mitzvah kabbalah so malchus shamayim shabbat. There was like a hashkafic reason why women were recommended to do it. V'lo mitzad zman kimo shchiva. It's not connected to the mitzvah b'shach b'chav kumecha. Sharei chelik zeh b'mitzvah zman gramahu. That's the whole reason that they're exempt, because the waking up and going to sleep, that actually is what fixates time. Let's try to finish the machshava. Our tradition places particular emphasis on the observing of mitzvos, and perhaps specifically those associated with tefillah, with regularity and consistency kviyus. For example, we try to have regular daily Torah study sessions. We daven 3 times a day, every day of the year. The point is emphasized by the following midrash, cited by the Ein Yaakov. Matzati katuv b'shem medrash, uvikashtia v'lo mitzasiya, v'chol shisa sidre v'zeu noscho. I couldn't find it anywhere else in Shas. Ben Zoma Omer, Matzinu posuk kolel yoser v'hu Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. This is it's a posuk that sort of has everything in it. Benana Soimer Matzinu posuk kolel yoser v'hu v'haftel recha kamocha. No, I find a pasuk that's even more inclusive. The pasuk of Ahavta. Shimon ben Pazi Yomer Matzinu pasuk kolel yoser v'hu Es hakeves ha'echad taseh b'boiker, v'es hakeves ha'sheni taseh bin arbayim. You have to bring the ola satamid, one sheep in the morning, one sheep in the afternoon. Ahmed Rav Pliny al Raglav Arma Halacha Keben Pa.
What's he saying? He couldn't find it. What does it mean he couldn't find it?
No.
I searched and couldn't find
They-
it anywhere in Shas, but Ben Zoma says, where's Ben Zoma? Where's Ben Zoma? It's
No,
not
no,
in
no,
Shas?
no, no, no. The Ein Yaakov is a compilation
Right.
of all the Agadata in Shas. The author, there was an author of the Ein Yaakov, so he brings a medrash in his Hagdama, in his introduction to the Ein Yaakov. He brings this medrash. He says he doesn't know where he doesn't know where he found this medrash because he searched high and low in all the Agadata in Sifri and Sifra. He doesn't know where it is, but this is like he had this medrash that Ben Zoma said the most important pasuk, or let's say the most general pasuk in the Torah is Shema Yisrael. And then Ben Nana said, no, it's V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. Shimon ben Pazi said, no, it's bring a tamid in the morning, bring a tamid in the afternoon. And then when they paskin, they said the halacha is like Ben Pazi, like that last statement. Bring a sheep in the morning. That's more important than Shema Yisrael. So there's a biography of the Ein Yaakov here. According to the Medrash, the pasuk presenting the mitzvah of offering the korban tamid twice a day is the most important pasuk in the entire Torah. The reason for this may be that although the Torah contains many important mitzvahs, the importance of connecting with Hashem on a daily basis, whether through a korban or tefillah, is still considered paramount. Remember, we had a Beis HaMikdash, and the Olas HaTamid was offered on behalf of the Tzibur, was offered on behalf of every Jew in Klal Yisrael. So every Jew had a connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the morning and in the afternoon by that sheep that was offered as the Olas HaTamid every day. Now, when we lost the Beis HaMikdash, our tefillahs have replaced the korbanos. One who maintains a regular relationship with Hashem has effectively transformed his life to revolve around these important activities. And everything he does during his day is elevated spiritually. This is suggested by the Maharal in the Siva Soilam. Ma'ashamar ben Pazi, that which Ben Pazi said, it's the most important principle in the Torah. Ratzaloimar, what he meant was, with the fact that somebody worships Hashem regularity, gomer, v'hu avdon, he's like his servant. A slave is never missing the service that he's supposed to do to his master. He serves him all the time. The ultimate goal, people have to view themselves as slaves to Kadosh Baruch Hu. Everything else is an explanation of that. Like Alfred North Whitehead is a famous philosopher who in the 1910s said, all the philosophy of the last 2,000 years was a footnote to Plato. It reminds me of that statement, that this notion that a person is supposed to see himself as an Eved HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the rest of it is footnotes. It's just explanations of that. They are mitzvahs who over this board of the Tariq mitzvahs is how the person serves Hashem. The same can be said about carefully upholding the proper zmanim for tefillah. One to make sure to recite Kriya Shema in its proper time every morning and evening, and is careful to adhere to the other times for tefillah, demonstrates that he accepts the Ol Malchus Shamayim upon himself in a very tangible way, which is in fact the main principle of Kriya Shema itself. Rav Ezra Bick raises an additional point concerning the importance of fulfilling the mitzvahs at their proper time. He explains that Jews who observe mitzvahs have a heightened sensitivity to time and nature due to their halachic observance. A while ago, I was speaking to a non-Jewish acquaintance on the net when I casually mentioned that there were only 10 minutes until sunset. I had to go, you see, and daven mincha, recite the afternoon prayers. Astonished, he asked me how I knew. Only then did I realize that his clock, his perception of time, worked in a different way than mine. Jerry, his afternoon ended at 6 p.m. Mine ended at sunset. So Jerry's questions, they really raised this whole thing. We, have a certain clock, 6 p.m. or noontime. But no, our halachic clock is different. When I mentioned to him that the moon would be full the following night, it did not surprise me in the slightest that he barely remembered that the moon waxes and wanes. Basic astronomy is a necessary part of Jewish awareness, at least as far as it affects our awareness of time. My time was in nature, the sun, the moon. His was on the wrist. Ignoring Shabbos holidays and special occasions like circumcision, which halachos require me to watch the clock on a daily basis. After nightfall, there's the evening prayer, Ma'ariv. In the morning, starting from shortly before sunrise, there's first Kriyat Shema, which must be said before the end of the third hour. Then morning prayers, which should be completed before the end of the fourth hour. What effect does this have on the observant Jew? Immediate response might be, a watch ticking in his ear probably drives him crazy. That is not so wrong, in fact. It does indeed impinge on his consciousness and changes his awareness of time. An observant Jew is first of all aware of time, of when he is, because he has always an obligation that requires him to know what time it is. Secondly, and I think more importantly, he is aware of time in a different manner than a non-halachic individual. Not all moments in time are equal. There's a time for tefillin, time for chakras, a time for prayer, and surprisingly, a time inappropriate for prayer. Sometimes you have to rush to finish in time. Sometimes you have to wait, not yet, because the time is not yet ripe. Nothing can be put off till tomorrow if it should be done today. Things that should be done tomorrow are meaningless if done today. In halacha, time is an aspect of life. The world was created in 7 days, each day with a different aspect. On the seventh day, God blessed the day, sanctified it. He sanctified the day itself. The idea of sacred places, places with significance, is still present in modern society, albeit in a weakening form. Judaism insists on sacred time, on special moments, no less than sacred places. This is not only for special occasions, like Shabbat and Yomim Tovim, but for the very flow of daily time itself. Not only are the moments special, full of meaning, but one is forced to be aware of the flow of time all the time. The sun setting in the western sky is not just a pretty sight, but the ebbing of day, which will never return. What had to be done today will be lost forever if you do not hurry up and do it before the edge of the sun sinks below the horizon. The new day has its own obligations, its own character, its own opportunities. Man lives in time. May we merit to appreciate the words of Rav Bick and to implement them in our daily lives as well, to fulfill each mitzvah in the proper time, and to value each period of time and not let it go to waste. Okay. Next week, we will start Zman Tefillah Shachris. And I believe it continues, the Hilchos Tefillah continues into volume 11, which I hope everyone has. Okay, everybody have a good week. Any questions, comments about anything said tonight?
Busy Shabbos is coming up, you know? It's like
Almost Shabbos, huh?
One day after
There's an
another.
expression, a yid let medacheshvan.
Right.
You gotta know this is and that. You know, the Muslims, if they miss a fast day, like let's say a pregnant woman can't fast, you know, they have to make it up.
Tashlumim.
Because of Tashlumim, in other words, they keep a count of the fast days they miss.
Yaakov,
We don't have such a
yeah,
day.
Yaakov Yellen was saying that the Muslims, if they miss a fast, they keep count and they have tashlumim of the count of the fast.
In other words, even if you can't do it today,
You can do it
another
tomorrow.
day.
Do it another day.
Tisha B'Av is gone, it's gone. You
Right.
can't make it up.
Right.
By the 10th day,
Right. You can't Tisha B'Av you missed, you can't make it up. Okay.
fascinating.
Very good. Well, anyways, to see the